previous videos, we mentioned about the typical content of the tender document. We know that the tender is an invitation sent to the potential contractor so that they can bid for the project, and this allowed the employer to choose the best candidate to be awarded with the project and acquire the building as per the design and the specifications. We also know that the contractor will need to compete among each other, offering the best price to the employer in order to increase their chances of getting the project. This process may seem favorable to the employer, which in fact is not quite. The reason being is the employers are normally personnel not quite related to the construction industry. They may have the limitations to know the market price or reasonable price for the entire construction project in order to prevent them to be slaughtered by the contractors. It is always good that the employer to invite several contractors to bid for the project and seek for the best offer. From the perspective of the contractor, of course they would like to maximize their potential profit, which at the same time they need to compete with the other contractor for the project. That means whether they are going to be awarded with the project is rather uncertain at the time they are bidding for the project. In order to increase their chance of winning any project, a contractor might have bid for several projects at the same time. Now this leads to an issue regarding the sincereness of the contractors in undertaking the project. In the case that the contractor wins several projects at the same time, which has already gone beyond their capacity, there is chances that the contractor going to withdraw without the consent of the employer. This leads to a situation that a contractor wins the tender but refuses to enter the contract with the employer. Now this situation leads to an administration's problems to the employer. And this brings us to the next topic that we're going to discuss in this video regarding the mechanism of an employer to attract serious tenderer, which are the contractors. And once the contractors is being selected, to increase the chances that the contractor will not withdraw themselves without the consent of the employer. For the best value of contract, the employer would like to attract only serious tenderer, which are the contractor, and also to prevent tenderers from manipulating the tendering process to their best interest. In order to achieve that, some monetary guarantee will be required. In the case that the contractors bidding for a project at random without intentions of signing the contract with the employer will get some compensations due to the problem caused by the contractor and seek for the next potential contractors to carry out the work. These are several types of monetary guarantee involved. First, it will be the tender document fee. This tender document fee is paid in cash by the tenderer upon issuance of the tender document. Knowing there is a tender going on, the contractor would like to bid for the project. By the time they acquire the tender document from the employer, they will need to pay a certain amount in cash, which is normally somewhere within few hundred ringgit Malaysia. This tender document fee is non-refundable. This helps the employer to filter those tenderers who are not sincere in bidding the project, as these actions will cost some money. Next, it will be the tender deposit. This tender deposit can be fully refunded to the unsuccessful tenderer subjected to the submissions of a bona fide tender. That means the submissions is sincere, honest, and without the intentions to deceive. By the time the tenderer submit the tender documents to be considered, they will need to place a deposit as per required in the tender document, hand it over to the employer, and wait for the final outcome after the review of the employer. If the contractor is unsuccessful to acquire the project, not being selected, then this tender deposit will be refunded. Then the successful contractor will have this tender deposit to be retained and converted into the earnest money. This brings us to the third type of the monetary guarantee. Now this earnest money is typically about 1% to 2% of the estimated cost of the work. Now we have the tender deposit to be fully refunded to those unsuccessful tenderer. Of course, the tender document fee is non-refundable. At the stage that the contractor is being confirmed, the employer will have the earnest money retained. This is to encourage the tenderer to sign the contract with the employer. If the tenderer refuses to sign the contract after the tender has been accepted, or if the tenderer chooses to withdraw his tender before the expiry of its validity period, that means the tenderer is actually withdrawing himself without the consent or agreement with the employer. With that, this earnest money will be forfeited. This earnest money will be fully refunded once the contract is formed. Now we have three major types of the monetary guarantee. To avoid confusions, let us reorganize the informations. The tender document fee is paid in cash when a contractor decided to acquire the tender document from the employer so that they can bid for the project based on the information provided in the tender document. By the time that they obtain the tender document, a certain amount of money is going to be paid in cash and it is non-refundable. Now the tenderers bring the tender document back, do some homework, quote the price, come up with the total project sum, and intend to bid for the project. By the time that they are submitting the tender document with the price that they have quoted, they will need to submit together with the tender deposit. Every tenderer will have to submit their tender deposit. Then the employer will review the tender and decide for the best candidate to undertake the project. There will be only one successful contractor, while the rest of them will be unsuccessful. For the unsuccessful tenderer, this tender deposit will be fully refunded. Only the tender deposit of the successful tenderer will be retained. Now there will be only one person having the tender deposit retained, and this tender deposit, it will be converted into the earnest money. Now it will be leave it to the contractor to decide whether to enter the contract with the employer or not. If the contractor successfully enter the contract with the employer, then this earnest money will be fully refunded. If the contractor refuses to sign contract with the employer, this earnest money will be forfeited, fully taken by the employer. What you see here, this amount of tender deposit and the earnest money should theoretically be the same. That means the tender deposit should also be about 1 to 2% of the estimated cost of the work. It is so that there will be a smooth conversions from the tender deposit into the earnest money to facilitate the contract signing between the employer and the contractor. These are certain rules and principles related to the tendering process. A contractor may not submit more than one tender for the same project. The purpose is to prevent the contractor from manipulating the tendering process. Next, the contractor whose tenders have been accepted is to enter necessary contract or agreement within 14 days from the dates of the acceptance. That means there is a time frame calculated from the date of the acceptance that the contractor will need to sign a contract with the employer for the project. Typically, the tender is open for acceptance for 90 days, which is about 3 months. Sufficient time is allocated for the contractors to do the homework and also for the employer to attract more tenderers to bid for the project, so that the employer have more options in selecting the best candidate for the project. Next, the issuer is not bound to accept the lowest or any tender received. This is normally made known to the tenderer during the tendering process, as there could be many other considerations. The winning contractor may not necessarily be offering the lowest price, and also the employer may also eventually choose the contractors who are not bidding for the project due to some considerations. That means the employer may not necessarily have to choose one out of all the submitted tender. If the employer is not satisfied, the employer may extend the tendering period or directly award to somebody else. Also, the durations of projects are normally clearly stated. For example, 12 months, 24 months or others. This gives the contractors an idea to work out their plannings in terms of the work progress as well as the amount of manpower to be put into the project.